we have saved thousands of dollars on flights with.
Like, guys, you got to realize when it's a tourist trap and when it's actually worth it.
Tipping culture is so crazy around the world. It's like
we've just come to the conclusion that there are friends and then there are travel friends. And
I feel like you pulled that out of your butt, but it's true.
Hey, you guys, I'm Steven.
I'm Giselle.
And we are also known as the Lover's Passport. And welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered Adventures. Today, we have 20 different ways to help you save money and travel on a budget. So we're going to get through as many as we can. Some of these are pretty obvious. Some of these you might not have thought about. But since we started traveling when we were broke college kids, we are here to help you do the same. Whether you are super young, maybe you are a little bit older, you're trying to learn how to save money and travel, because traveling can be very expensive. And I feel like that's one of the main reasons that people don't travel a lot, is they think it's too expensive.
Yeah, no, I agree. And before we get into all of the money saving tips, I'd like to remind everyone that traveling, in order to really prioritize it, you have to make it a mindset. You have to make it a priority in your life. And so if you're not looking and envisioning your future to have a ton of travel, if you're not putting that up in your top 3 must-haves, you're not going to make time to do any of these things or effort to do any of these things to travel. So it really starts in your brain before you start planning all of your trips.
Yeah, I feel like that's one thing that a lot of people, like, they just block it off and they're like, oh, these people travel all the time, they must be super rich.
When who's your sugar daddy?
Exactly. When in reality, like back in the day, we would road trip from Friday to Sunday, so we didn't have to take time off work. We still worked full-time jobs. We slept in the back of our car. We found free places to camp on, so we could camp for free. The only thing really we had to pay for was gas
and food.
Yeah, exactly. So travel can really be as cheap as that. Of course, it really depends where you're located. We live in California, so we do have that benefit because there's so much natural beauty around us. But a lot of these tips can be applied whether you live near a natural location or maybe you planned a little week-long getaway if you're heading out to Europe this summer or whatever your plans are. But with that, let's start jumping in. So starting with number 1, we have travel off-peak season. This one's kind of obvious, but I feel like a lot of people, because everyone tries to travel from the months of June, July, and August. That's when it's the most expensive time to travel most places.
You have to think, like, every student is on summer break. So immediately a ton of families of all ages from 0 to 18, or I guess even you're 21 up to 21, everyone is going on summer vacation because of school. So if you can try and plan your vacations around the shoulder seasons instead of like generic like spring break, winter break, and summer break. If you guys can plan in the fall, for example, that's a great time to go. October is an underrated month to travel.
Yeah, I feel like anytime we are traveling, one of the big questions that we always ask people is like, when is the best time to go? And honestly, they tell us May and October. September, October. Like those 2 months. May is really great, but it can get a little hairy because sometimes it's like stick season. So winter just ended, spring isn't quite there yet, and a lot of
May
like
gray.
Yeah, so it can be a little rough sometimes in May, but it really depends. In September, October, like temperatures are cooling down. Typically the first snowstorm hasn't hit yet. All the kids are back in school. Most people aren't in summer mode anymore. They're starting to prepare for winter. So like she said, it's a great time to travel. Prices are typically a lot cheaper, sometimes 50% cheaper. I was just researching some stuff because we're getting ready to put out our Switzerland YouTube video, and it's crazy when traveling peak season during summer or peak season during winter compared to traveling during their shoulder months, it says can be up to 80% cheaper.
We went to Switzerland the first time middle to the last week of September, and I clearly remember all of our guides were like, yeah, this is slow season for us, and we're like, what? That's crazy.
Some places get so like the whole town shuts down during summer because everyone's out there. So summer is sometimes a great time to travel. Sometimes places are closed. Like when we were in Michigan, places just closed down. They're like, yeah,
we don't get the summertime though.
But it was still like, or I guess that it said in Switzerland.
I feel like in more more so in Europe. Like in
Yeah.
Iceland, for example, when we did our whole walking tour around Reykjavik, they were like, oh yeah, if it's sunny outside, all of these places close because all the Europeans just want to go outside and like enjoy the weather. So just keep that in mind. But off-season travel is a great time to go. I usually just will actually intentionally book off-season to travel because less crowds, less expensive. Good way to go.
Yeah. And if you don't know when the like off season is, Google's
It's a great resource.
We're always so surprised when we get DMs all the time and people are like, when, like, asking us very generic questions. I don't know, like, what's 2 + 2? Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but we're like, guys, Google's right there. Like, we try and get back to as many people as we can, but great resource.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Next.
number 2, we have staying in hostels.
If you're older, this might be an iffy one for you, but if you're in your like 18 to 20s range, absolutely go to a hostel. I would say that's like one of the best ways to mingle with people like from all over the world that are typically in the like, actually I'd say like 18 to 30s range. I feel like is the majority of the target audience of hostels. And it's just such a fun way to meet people from all over the world, from all different backgrounds. Usually you're all like either backpacking or like trying to save money. And so you find a sense of community at all of these hostels. I did that when I was 18 and I was studying abroad in Europe. And anytime we bounced around, we were able to visit 10 different countries that summer. I was studying abroad in Maastricht in the Netherlands. And yeah, we just booked hostels everywhere. And it's like $20-$30 for a bed for a weekend. That's like a steal. As long as so hostels, with all of these tips, you're either sacrificing money or comfort, right? So that is a trade-off when you're doing budget travel. You're typically trading off comfort, cleanliness, something like that. And so when you are doing the hostels, typically how I've done them in the past when I was a teenager was we would always do the public dorm rooms. And you and I stayed in one in Italy last year because the accommodations in Venice were absolutely ridiculous. Like a minimum hotel room was like $400 a night, and that was just not in the budget. So we stayed right outside the city in a hostel in a public dorm room for a couple nights, and it was totally fine. We had like 4 other people in the room, and we had like bunk beds, so we didn't like sleep together, but it was totally fine. If you're saving money, like who cares? You know?
Yeah, I feel like in the grand scheme of things, one thing we always like to discuss is how much are you actually going to stay at the place that you're staying for a hotel or a hostel or an Airbnb. For instance, we were planning a trip to Hawaii and there were 2 different Airbnbs that we were looking at. And between them, there was a huge, like one was 50% of the price, one was 100, like very, very big price difference. And the big question that we decided was, okay, well, are we going to spend most of our time at the Airbnb relaxing and having that sort of trip? Or are we going to plan a trip to where we go? That's where we stay during the evenings, and the rest of the time we're out exploring. So I feel like that really depends. Hostels, it's not really going to be a spot that you hang out during the day.
Unless you're trying to like get work done. We did do that at the last one we did in Venice, but
whereas like let's say we're staying in like a nice resort in like Hawaii or a nice resort in French Polynesia or Aruba, then if you're just going to go for something like that and you just want to go and relax, then yes, paying for a more expensive place is worth it. But if you're trying to ball on a budget, hostels are great, which kind of takes us into number 3, which is very similar, but looking at Airbnb. If you are only looking at hotels, even hostels sometimes can be more expensive than an Airbnb. If you find a really good deal and you rent like a room in someone's place, it can be a really good option to save quite a bit of money.
We did that. We use Airbnb all the time, but the one time I remember that we saved a ton of money was when we did Athens and Greece last year. And we got just like a little attic in someone's home, and it was perfect. Like, I think Airbnb, I do all of our travel planning, so I will look at all of the options before I book an accommodation. So I go through hotels, kind of see what the variety of price range is looking there, then cross-check that with Airbnbs, and then cross-check that with hostels. Typically nowadays we're not doing hostels as much because we do have the luxury of having a bit of a higher income than we did when we were broke 21-year-olds doing this thing. But yeah, I think it's a good way to compare all 3 options before you book, because sometimes you'll be surprised that Airbnbs are significantly cheaper than hotels, or vice versa, honestly. It also depends how many people you're traveling with. If you're going with a group, typically Airbnb is going to be the way to go.
Yeah. But anyway, this kind of takes us to our next one. We haven't done this one too often, but house sitting. It's called Trusted House Sitters, and it's actually a really cool opportunity if you guys are a solo traveler and you're just looking to be able to hop around. We have friends that will put their house on Trusted House Sitters, and it works really well.
Yeah, all of our friends with pet parents, or that are pet parents, typically use Trusted House Sitters, and they just have people traveling from abroad that are coming to watch their pets and stay at their house while they're gone.
Yeah,
it's a good gig.
That's basically what it is. So people will come and, like, if you have plants or dogs or cats or whatever it is, it's almost like free dog sitting. They get a place to stay, and obviously there's a lot of variables of, is there going to be someone there? Are you in the boonies where someone might not technically want to stay in that area? Or are you near like a major hub where it's really easy for someone to want to travel there?
You can choose where you want to go.
Yeah.
You can filter it by location. And usually there's some good stuff all around the world. There's also some other similar kind of style websites where it's not necessarily house sitting, but you can do like couch surfing. You can do, there's like work vacations. Like I clearly remember some of our friends, they stayed in New Zealand for like I don't know, a couple of weeks, and in exchange they were doing like household chores around the house for these older folks.
Yeah.
And so it's like a good like free work exchange kind of thing. There's lots of options for that out there on the internet. All you have to do is just go Google it.
Yeah, and it really depends on your comfort level too. If like you are a little bit more reserved and you don't put yourself out there as much, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But I feel like if you're up for it, especially like you said, a lot of these options are really good if you're in your younger generation. Not necessarily great if like you're traveling with a family. These wouldn't apply.
I would not recommend that for a family, but it's a good option if you're solo traveling.
Yeah, if you're flying by the seat of your pants, you're like, I want to see the world. There you go.
Make it happen.
Like if you listen to last week's episode with Corey, he mentioned like when he was in his 20s, this is what he did. He wanted to travel as much as he could, so he just would hop around, and he was known as that. He was a great option because he was a bachelor. He was a single dude.
Yep.
So,
but he said to max out your credit card and do that. I think this is a much smarter financial piece of advice.
All right. Well, with that, it takes us into number 5, which is traveling overnight. So if you can book a red-eye flight or book like an overnight train, I feel like there's 2 birds in one stone. You get to get from one spot to the next, and you don't have to pay for a hotel that night.
Sometimes I purposely book red eyes for that reason. I hate them, but also it's like, do I really want to spend the extra $300 on a hotel where we're barely even going to use it anyways?
Yeah, I feel like as long as you have a good sleep mask, we have these ones from Amazon that are phenomenal, comfiest sleep masks ever. You have like noise canceling headphones or earplugs. I just wear earplugs when we go to bed. And then as long as you have like, you're okay, like get a little blankie, I feel like red-eye flights are no problem. Melatonin is huge, especially if you take it every night. Obviously not good, but it's great for when you're traveling, switching between time zones. I think it's so handy.
We are not health professionals. Do not take our advice in the health field, but we use melatonin a lot.
Yeah, and we do this option a lot. Like G said, we book red-eye flights all the time. So great way. I would, once again, I do not do all the travel planning, but would you say that it is it's considerably cheaper?
Yeah, and usually the flights themselves are cheaper for red eyes. And then with the overnight sleeper stuff, I've never done an overnight sleeper train, but I did used to do when I was studying abroad the overnight Flix buses. That's another thing. If you're going to do an alternative form of transport around Europe, usually like trains and buses are going to be way more affordable than flying everywhere you go. So we did a lot of Flixbus because they were much more in the budget, and the overnight was nice. Like they had little recline seats on the bus. They had like chargers and stuff. You're typically in just like a nice coach bus, but got me from A to Z, you know.
Travel overnight. See if you can do it. Taking us into number 6. We're flying through these. Cooking your own meals.
This is a huge one. Like, especially for us when we started out doing the Lover's Passport. Like Steven said in the beginning, we were road tripping to places around California, around the Southwest, and eating out adds up. So we would try and meal prep everything in advance, or just go and buy groceries and kind of have an idea of what meals we want to eat before we go. So we're only buying like specific groceries that aren't going to go to waste.
Yeah, I mean, eating out is getting crazy these days. Like McDonald's, you go and you get like a burger, fries, and a drink. It can be like $15, $16.
It's like over $20 for 2 people.
It's insane how expensive eating out is getting, and especially if you guys, obviously it's it's easier if you're out and about, you're hiking around in the city. But if you can just go to a grocery store and buy your groceries for the whole week, like we've saved hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and it's a lot easier and more convenient in a lot of senses. Let's say places close down early when you're traveling abroad. Maybe you're not directly next to someone. Maybe you're finishing a hike during sunset because you wanted to see the sunset up there.
That is such a common problem. We will be hiking during sunset or sightseeing during sunset, and all the places are closed by like 8 p.m. and sunset's at like 8:30, and you're like, where can I eat now? You know?
Yeah, I think that is a very, very valid one. And also like planning ahead, like we'll bring our jet boil with us, which is like a little propane stove, boils water really easy. It's super easy to make backpacking meals on the go. We can make coffee with that. We'll bring tea. Like bringing some of our own stuff from home makes it super easy. So that way when we do land somewhere, we're a little bit more prepared as well. So all things to think about. Once again, goes with where you're going. I don't know if I would necessarily make all of my own food if we were staying in somewhere like Italy, because Italy's food's a little bit cheaper. I would want that. That's part of the experience. And planning like maybe one meal out is good, but we're talking like every single meal like,
that adds up. And
exactly.
And I was gonna say, we're big foodies when we travel, and even if we are balling on a budget, like we will try to, for example, breakfast is something that is usually pretty universal. We'd rather eat breakfast and lunch at home, or making it via groceries, or bringing it ourselves depending on the location. And then dinners we'll go out and like splurge, or we'll just go book a local food tour or something like that. And that's a great way to go and see a ton of different spots, usually for a like pretty reasonable price. Food tours are so fun.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to like get acquainted with the city. So that definitely make sure you are cooking your own meals. Or another thing that you can do is pack your own meals. I remember that my dad when he was younger, they couldn't afford to eat out in a whole bunch of places. So when they would they would do these huge month-long road trips, and they would freeze all of their meals for like the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then when they got there, they would heat up the meals. It was super fast. So they did all the prep beforehand. Obviously, that's a little extreme.
It's like making your own backpacking meals, but not backpacking.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's lots and lots of different things, but we're just saying eating out, if that is like one thing that
it adds up.
Yeah, it adds up very, very fast. So next one, taking us into number 7, is using travel rewards. This one is huge, I feel like, and not a lot of people, or at least I took no advantage of this before I met Giselle. I feel like she is the travel rewards queen now.
And I think we've mentioned a few times, we will be doing a full travel credit card points and miles podcast episode coming up fairly shortly.
Honestly, at this point, I feel like we should just make it the season finale. Just plan on that,
because we keep
hyping it up the whole season.
A crash course for points and miles, yes. But for real, they literally are so helpful. So we just met a bonus where we got 100,000 points for Chase, where we just signed up for one of the Ink Unlimited cards for the Creator Passport business card. And so now, like for meeting the minimum spend, which we were going to hit anyway, since our business has expenses. And so we just got 100,000 points. That's 100,000 points. That's a lot. Like that, I could do so much with, man. I could do a couple nights at like the Ritz-Carlton in Hawaii with that. I could do like something in Bora Bora. I could get us flights round trip to Tahiti. Like 100,000 points, there's a lot to play with. And so don't discount the points. And if you guys are interested in getting started with that, we have a freebie on our website on theloverspassport.com. You can go download our beginner's guide to points and miles, and that will get you started pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, even downloading like other apps, like we were talking about airlines, but there's all kinds of different apps that give you rewards.
My favorite one, well, there's like reward apps, and then there's like discount apps. So there's ones like Thrifty Traveler Premium, which is something we have saved thousands of dollars on flights with, where yes, it is a paid service. I think when we got it was like $80 a year or something.
Which if you are not eating out, you can afford that very easily.
And we have a $10 coupon code for you guys. That's Passport 10. I know that because that's one we use all the time. And that'll save you $10 off that membership. But we've saved thousands. Thousands of dollars.
So explain it in like a little short summary. We I didn't know this was even a thing, but you can set your home airport. So we live near LA. We set our home airport as LAX, and you don't really get to choose where you're going because it's all random. They don't know where, like, you can kind of write a list like, okay, if I get deals for these 10 spots, I'm going to book them. But every single day when we wake up, they're sending us different alerts like, oh, flight drop just went from LAX to Florida. Oh, another flight drop from here to Hawaii. Oh, Hawaii flight drop. And it'll tell you the old price versus what the new price is, as well as point redemption. So let's say a flight to Hawaii typically is like $900. But it drops down to like $150. It'll say like huge alert. Typically this price or flight is this much money. This is how much it is right now. And it gives you specific travel dates. It tells you how to book it if you're booking with like points or miles. So even me being like a total travel noob when it comes to all the rewards, they make it so simple. So we can't recommend them enough.
And then there's other apps and stuff like Gas Buddy, for example, that gives you like the cheapest gas stations nearby. There's, what else do we use all the time? Travel Freely is a good one to keep track of all of your travel credit cards and offers and things like that. Subscribing to newsletters like the Daily Drop, that's one that we have, as well as Thrifty Traveler. Let's see what else. There's so many different ones. And then even using, this kind of goes into one later. I know I'm spoiling it ahead of time, but using cashback sites as well, and pairing that with your travel credit cards like Rakuten. That's one that we've used in the past as well to do a little more cashback shopping, for example. There's so many different ways to get rewards on your like everyday spend.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about it before, but obviously if you're not responsible with money, we don't recommend credit cards.
If you have debt, don't recommend it.
Yeah, but if you are responsible, you don't
treat it
have
like a
debt,
debit,
then it's like there's no reason not to use a credit card, especially when you're traveling. I remember when I was a kid, my dad was like, as soon as you turn 18, we're signing you up for a credit card because that's where you're going to start making everything back. And I was like, okay, like there's no way they actually give you free money from spending money. And then after 1 year, that's how I bought all of my Christmas presents. I didn't have to pay any money. I just spent money on my credit card, paid it off at the end of every single month, and then I used all the extra cash back that we got for all the Christmas presents. I was like, this is the best thing in the world. And we use it to redeem with points, which you get way more value compared to cashback cards typically, right?
Typically, yes. I'd recommend points cards over cashback cards, but we'll get into that on our Points and Miles pod. Anyways, let's get into
around.
the next
all right,
one.
The next one, this one kind of goes.
I already covered this one.
Okay, okay. We'll skip this one. We'll jump into avoiding tourist traps.
Whenever you are going to a famous place, let's say the Trevi Fountain in Rome, like if you are going to restaurants, shops right around a historical landmark that is extremely popular, expect prices to be jacked up. Like
it gets crazy.
Go blocks away and you'll find much more normal prices. It's
like, I feel like gelato, that's like since you said the Trevi Fountain, if you are near the Trevi Fountain, very famous place in Italy, and you try and buy a gelato, let's say across the street, that's going to be the most touristy gelato place ever. The gelato probably is going to be mediocre.
And it's like 3 times the price.
Yeah, and then you walk 3 blocks away, and that gelato typically is going to be way better. It's going to be way cheaper and way less busy. I feel like you need to do your research on what is a tourist trap compared to what isn't. For instance, if you are in England and you want to go and see what are the big stones called?
Stonehenge.
Oh, if you want to go say that and pay like $150 to do a little half-day tour,
at a pile of rocks.
Like, guys, you got to realize when it's a tourist trap and when it's actually worth it. I feel like can be up for debate, but there's so many free things you can do that aren't going to be those tourist traps that are way too much money.
Yeah. And like if you want to do it, go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes you need to do, like, if let's say we're in London, like the London Eye is expensive. Is it a tourist trap? Yes. Can it be really cool?
Did you ever do that?
No, I did not.
That. Yeah, my dad. Okay, so my family's British. My dad lives in London. My grandma lives in London. I am half British. The London Eye is like cool and stuff. We did it when I was a kid, but you'll find a ton of rooftop restaurants that have like very similar views of the city skyline.
I remember I was like, "Oh, should we go do it?" And you guys were like, "No, what are you talking
my dad
about?
Will chew you out.
Why would we do that?" I feel like there are examples of tourist traps that are worth it though. Like in Venice, we were talking about that earlier, going and doing a gondola ride down the canals. I feel like that is cool. Super touristy, obviously, like the most touristy thing you can do. They'll sing to you, they'll push you along, but I thought it was very nice. I think like things like that are totally worth it. That would be like a very interesting episode, is writing down all of the tourist traps that we've gone and saying worth it, or we can
We used to do those episodes,
Yeah.
the overrated, underrated,
We would do
justified.
it per country though. I feel like
Yeah.
we might have to bring that back. Let us know in the comments if you guys want to see that. And I'll take a quick moment here. If you guys are watching on YouTube, shout out to you guys. Thank you for helping us out on there. If you guys are listening though on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you want to see it this season, we are actually doing video. So you can head over to the YouTube channel for the Lovers or Unfiltered Adventures podcast.
Come watch Karen. She's on the couch with us.
Karen's hanging out. We're relaxing. It's a very fun way. If you guys have YouTube Premium, you guys can watch it and close out that. But if not, we love to see you on YouTube. But with that, let's jump back in. So that was avoiding tourist traps. This takes us to the midway point. Free walking tours. Now,
There's like walking tours in almost every major city that are completely free. Even like nearby, there's free Santa Barbara walking tours
yeah.
and free Los Angeles walking tours. It's a great way to get acquainted with a city, honestly.
I feel like if you do not, like if you're not a huge foodie, one of the things that we like to do is we always do like a food tour right when we get there. If you're not a huge foodie, but you still want to get a tour of the city, I feel like just doing one of the free walking tours right when you get there is like the best way to understand the lay of the land.
Or if you want to be really unethical, what you could do is you could go to a popular spot and just kind of like tag along in a tourist group, like make it not obvious that you're like following them, but follow them.
Just look for
like,
the people with the headphones
or with the
you
big
know?
signs on where they're holding the flags and stuff. Usually you can overhear some information about places if you do that.
Yeah.
We've never done that, just as a disclaimer, but we have heard of other people doing
We
that.
have seen the free walking tours everywhere though. We've actually heard quite a few. We did one of the walking tours on a tourism board gig that we did a while ago, and I remember we had like a private guide that was taking us around.
Which one? Was that Canada?
I don't think it was Canada. It was in Europe. I believe it was when we were in Basque Country. And then they were talking about how there were free guides everywhere. And they were like, oh, but the free guides say they're quote unquote free. And they technically, like, they always ask for a tip. I think they were just saying like her tour was better than all the free guides. What I'm assuming it is because you pay for her tour.
But also, if you're going on a free walking tour, like, and the guide is like being an ass and pressuring you to tip, like we have no problem not tipping people if they don't deserve it or if they're harassing you. Like stick it to them. I don't know.
Exactly.
Nobody deserves a tip. You should be earning a tip.
I totally agree. I feel like we can record a whole episode on tipping.
Tipping culture is so crazy around the world. It's like in some countries you get offended, or people get offended if you tip, and then in other countries you tip 20%. That's not enough.
Okay, first off, I think both sides of the spectrum, little weird. Like if you do a good job and I try and give you some extra cash, why are you getting upset?
Well, it's like a pride thing. Like you're making it look like they can't afford it without your tip, you know?
I don't know. Someone hands me an extra 20. Even if I was getting paid good, I'd be like, brother, thank you hooking it up. But on the other end of the spectrum, I feel like you're right. Especially in America, it's gotten like wild.
Out of hand.
Like 20% is like low now. I feel like when you go into some place, they're like, no, you should tip like 25 or 30%. I'm like, you're already...
It's the employer's fault. Like the employer should be paying employees a livable wage. When I worked as a hostess at a 5-star hotel restaurant in Santa Barbara, I was making $14 an hour, and I would only, like, even with tips, like, or I think the servers must have made like $10 an hour, and we made 14, but they got to keep all of the tips, and we only had to be tipped out 1%.
Yeah,
that's so small of like,
I think that's crazy.
The crazy amount, but they were all making bank. They were making thousands of dollars a night in tips. So like, I get it, but also like the people that aren't getting the tips directly, like, should be either tipped out better or your employer should pay better. I don't know.
Yeah. Tipping has definitely got a little out of hand. I mean, I have no problem tipping. I feel like if they do a good job, like if they're on top of it, if they're asking, they're very tentative, I feel like if they do a good job, serving, but I feel like the whole stigma of you need to tip is a little like,
it honestly gives me anxiety in new places.
Yeah.
Like my biggest, not fear, but my biggest piece of anxiety when traveling is usually around cash. because I'm like, oh, like, do we have to tip here? Do I have enough cash for that? Do I have enough cash to get like on a public transportation if they don't take card? Like, wouldn't it be nice if everywhere is just like card only?
I know.
I hate having cash on me.
It's getting crazy. I feel like with they have both sides of the spectrum again. You go to some places, they're like, we don't want cash. We only take card. And then you go to other places and they're like, no card. We only take cash. I'm like,
it's so stressful figuring it all out. Because then also like people's information is outdated.
Especially when we were on a cruise. Okay, when you go on cruises, you're in different countries typically like every single day, right?
Well, a European cruise is one thing because you're typically on the Euro. But this last one we did when we were in Asia and you're in like 5 different Asian countries. You switch
currency every single day. That was crazy. And then when you're there, like most of the places, especially in Asia, don't take card, or if they do, you have, it's like all these crazy fees and there's minimums. Yeah. It just starts to get wild.
The amount of headache that we had on that cruise of going and getting our taxi drivers to drop us off at an ATM to go get cash and stuff. Ugh, it was a pain. Anyways, we're off topic. Yeah. Let's move on.
So that we've made it halfway. Jumping into number 11. This is one we do all of the time. Travel with friends.
Splitting the costs is honestly so nice. Like the Switzerland trip that we did, we had 7 people in a van at one point.
Might have been a little much, but
yeah, but it kept costs down a lot because when you're able to split accommodation and like rental cars and things like that with a ton of other people, your like base minimum is going to be way smaller than if you were to just buy yourself. Same thing with, we're going to Norway and the Lofoten Islands again in a month now, less than a month, July 4th.
We're stoked.
And we're now going on a group trip with, it's in total 9 of us. So I'm really curious because we're staying about the same amount of time. Well, a little bit different because we were doing a massive road trip out there last time, but we're going to be out there for about like 10 days ish. So I'm curious to see what the costs are like compared to when we were out there, like with just the 2 of us.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. And I feel like when you're traveling with friends, it has pros and it has cons. Sometimes it's
just harder logistically. Yeah. Like somebody has to step up and plan and like make the final decisions. That's me.
G is that person. But then on the other end, you also have to have people that are willing to go along with your plan. There's been a few of our group trips in the past where one person does all the planning, and then there's like some people that are like, oh, well, I have these food restrictions, or like,
no, that's not true. I am so accommodating when I'm planning a trip, and this is something as like the travel mom of the group. When I'm planning a trip, I make sure anyone on the trip, I send out the itinerary in advance. Say, hey, if there's anything that you guys want to do that's not on the itinerary, please let me know. Let's put it on there. Let's find out a time to go in there, whatever. If there's anything missing, or if you want to change anything, you don't want to do anything, have an open discussion. Maybe that's my comm major in me. And then I will ask, does anyone have any food restrictions or allergies that we need to be aware of? You know, like my little 5-star hostess in me. Okay. So we go through those 2 questions, and usually people are like, oh no, it's okay. I eat anything, whatever. If you answer that way, you have to make sure that you're fine, like going forward. And typically Steven and I will also come up with a list of ideas for like meals if we're planning on cooking and staying in an Airbnb, which we are doing this time around as well. But you can't get mad. You can't get mad if I've asked you all of those questions in advance and then you're like, well, I don't want any of this. I'm like, okay, well, you can also go buy your own food. I'm not like gonna hold you with a gun to eat whatever I want, you know?
I feel like that we've just come to the conclusion that there are friends and then there are travel friends, and we have like a very I feel like we do a good job. Everyone gets a trial run. Every single person we meet or go on trips with gets a trial run. But then after that, you really start to understand like, oh, these people are so go with the flow. They're really easy to travel with. And then there's other people that maybe they're easy to travel, but maybe they just have different versions of travel. Like we're very go.
Want to sit at the resort all day.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's totally okay. They love to travel that way. We just don't want to go on a trip necessarily with it. And that's totally okay. Like we have great friends that we don't travel with constantly. We have great friends we do travel with. I feel like it's totally up to you. But traveling with friends, great way to save money. Splitting costs, fantastic. Or as a couple, great way.
That also works too.
Especially when we first started dating.
Yeah, if you're not like sharing a bank account, it's nice to split 50-50.
All right, getting into the next one. Being flexible and booking last minute trips.
Okay, now this one kind of goes a little bit against like some of my travel planning, Being flexible is huge. If you can just like how we plan, honestly, is we have a list of locations we want to go and we don't have dates. We never plan anything by specific dates. So then when we get a fare drop or a like points and miles deal, we'll just book it whenever. Like if it comes in and it's like, okay, let's say New Zealand, for example, this is what happened last year. We're like, we really want to go to New Zealand in the New Zealand summer time frame. So anywhere from November to like February would be ideal. And we got a flight drop, immediately booked it because we got a really good deal. It was within the time frame we wanted. And we were completely flexible, so we could just choose the dates that had the cheapest flights. And we ended up getting 3 flights for like $250 or something.
It was absurd.
It was insane. It was such a good deal. It was a Delta Sky Miles deal, so we cashed in like 80,000 points or something. I don't remember it 100%, but it saved a ton of money by being flexible because we were able to choose the flight dates that optimized the costs. And yeah, it was nice. So we try and recommend people book by the destination, not by the timing or the dates. If you can. If you're working a 9 to 5, obviously that can be a little difficult. But if you have like an allotted PTO time frame, or sorry, a certain amount of PTO that you can use, you can still kind of be a little flexible with this. Unless you're like planning around your kids, that's where it's a little harder, and we totally understand you can't be as flexible. And then last minute deals. And this is where I was like, oh, okay, well, this kind of conflicts. Last minute deals and booking really far in advance can both be really helpful, but at different times. So booking last minute, for example, like when I think of this tip, I think of Antarctica. There's a lot of really amazing Antarctica cruise steals at the last minute because these cruises have to sail whether they're full or not because they already have a ton of spaces. And so sometimes if you're, once again, flexible, and you're looking like 2 weeks before and there's still a ton of availability on one of these cruises, you can usually get a really good deal. And there's like a specific website. I forget exactly what it's called, but I get like these email alerts specifically for Antarctica that are like drop, like start getting these deals, like crazy drop deals. Claire and Peter, if you guys follow them on Instagram, that's how they tracked their, crazy Antarctica deal. So I'd go look at their page and figure out what that was, but
there's all kinds of different websites to do that, especially with cruises. I feel like those ones have they have to fill the ship or else they're losing money on some of those cruises. So you can get cruises all over the world for very, very cheap if you're willing to book last minute.
Yeah, I feel like with flights though, that doesn't work. I feel like with flights, it's honestly more expensive waiting to the last minute. That's where you want to be pretty far in advance. I try and book flights at least 3 to 6 months out.
Yeah.
All right.
So with that, we are going into number 13, which is avoiding foreign transaction fees. So with this, you just need to use a credit card or a debit card that does not have any foreign transaction fees. And you'd actually be surprised how much money this will save you, especially if you're traveling abroad. It gets crazy.
It will add up. It's like usually $3 to $5 every time you use a card that has a foreign transaction fee. So it's kind of annoying. Most of the travel cards that we recommend that you can actually also find in the link in our bio on the Lover's Passport, most of them don't have foreign transaction fees. So you're talking like Amex Platinum, for example, no travel fees. Capital One Venture X, none of those. None of the Chase cards have those as well. So yeah, you should be good to go.
Yeah, just make sure you check before you go. Because I remember my first trip to Iceland. I went to Iceland, bought like little snack. I would buy a hot dog that cost $3-4, and I would get a $2.50 fee every single time I bought a hot dog. So it just got crazy. And I bought like 8 hot dogs that trip. So by the end of the trip, I was at like $25 extra for literally nothing.
Annoying.
Just using. I was so frustrated when I got back.
Well, lesson learned. And then I honestly, where this hits us the most is debit card foreign transaction fees. Because when you're withdrawing cash for, like we were saying, those cash heavy areas, if you're not going to like a specific ATM, you could get a ton of fees for ATM withdrawal fees. So we don't have this one yet, and it's on our list to go do it. But the Charles Schwab card actually will waive all foreign transaction fees. So that's something nice that we still have to go do. But we'd recommend it for any of you in the market for a good travel debit card too.
Yes. All right. So we're starting to run out of time. We still have 6 left to go through. So we're going to kind of
rapid fire. Let's
bang these out. Next up, travel insurance. This
Game changer.
Oh, it has saved us a few times. You might not need it if you, like I said, you guys are staying in hostels or super flexible. But if, let's say, you have a job, you get sick, something happens with your family, like having travel insurance is
Peace of
so
mind. It's peace of mind. We have a year-long plan from Allianz, and we've used them for the past couple of years. And it's just like so nice knowing if our flight gets delayed, if we need to change our hotel, if like something happens, we will get our money back, because you'd be surprised how often that kind of stuff happens. So we'd recommend investing in it. I personally think a year-long plan, like the one from Allianz, is better than buying it every single time you fly, because
especially if you travel more than 3 times a year.
Yeah, it's like 35 or $40 for like trip protection anytime you buy a flight, and that's just for the flight. That's not even for like the hotel or anything like that. And our plan for the year, I think, is like $250. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think at the end of the day, it's a better ROI if you get a year-long plan over a like individual plans, if that makes sense.
Obviously they change depending on which place you go with,
and your like insurance liability and all that kind of stuff. Like, we're a young, healthy couple, so our insurance might be lower than yours, but I'm not sure.
Anyway, next one is gonna be pretty easy. Free activities. Now I'm gonna give you an example of what I mean by this. That what we really mean is researching free activities ahead of the time. What happens when, let's say, you travel to LA? We're hosting a meetup here pretty soon, and let's say in the middle of LA you fly here and you're like, okay, what am I going to do? And you start researching things online the last minute. You're going to get all these ads from like Get Your Guide, or let's say you walk out of the hotel and you're like, okay, what should I do? The hotel's going to have all of these paid tours. There's going to be lots and lots of things that you have to pay for in order to do. But if, let's say, before you go on the trip, you spend the time doing your research, looking at all the different free activities, planning out your hikes, maybe going to the beach. There's so many things you can do for free in all of these different destinations around the world. But when you wait and you just show up and you have no idea what you're doing, I feel like that's when you end up spending a lot of money on expensive tours, because you're
honestly just doing the research and free activities.
Exactly. I mean, that's what a lot of guides are, right? You pay like $35 for, let's say, our Switzerland guide. In reality, you could find all that information online if you really search. Yeah, if you spent the 5 to 8 hours planning.
It was more than that. I researched that trip for like 40 plus hours.
Let's say you spend 40 at like what in the long run we have a bunch of free activities that you can do on our Switzerland guide. So that small little $35 thing with all the free activities is going to save you time and money compared to if you were doing the 40 hours of research, paying for these tours that are going to take you to free locations. I always think that's funny when you pay for like the half day or full day tour and they take you to
by yourself.
Yeah, they take you to 8 different free locations that if you had done your research on free activities, you could have saved all that money. So that's all I'm saying.
Figure it out if you actually need a guide or not. I think that's the biggest good piece of advice. Yeah. Okay, next up, we kind of already went over this one.
I feel like this one is a little different though. So being flexible.
We literally said that.
Earlier, we said being flexible or like with your schedule. I feel like this one, being flexible, is let's say you're on a trip and something gets canceled or moved around. If you have to book last minute, if you have to do things, I feel like it can be very expensive. But if you're super flexible when you're on the trip, once again, it comes back to your work. If you can push a trip a day out, if you can push a trip a day back, let's say you're on a flight and they say, okay, you can't get on the flight, it gets delayed till tomorrow. That can cause all kinds of different problems,
right? And that's
right?
why you have travel insurance.
Exactly. But if you're flexible, maybe you take the voucher for $800 for a flight, you fly tomorrow. I feel like it can save you so much time, and you can actually get money back if you're super flexible. Like we said, there's a lot of times we've been flying out and it's for a client and we're like, oh, they just offered up a $500 ticket or a $500 flight voucher if we are okay to fly out tomorrow. Should we just do it tomorrow? But then we're like, we're doing it for a client. We should probably But if we were flexible, if we didn't have to be there, like, that could have saved us a ton of money.
I feel like you pulled that out of your butt, but it's true.
I mean, I feel like those are very different. Be
flexible and be flexible mean the same thing. They're different examples. All right.
I wanted to hit my 20 tips, G.
Okay. Number 17 then is going camping. This is a great way to save money because you're not paying for like a hotel, hostel, or Airbnb. But honestly, at this point, like some hostels are the same price as a campsite. That being said, free camping, if you guys are using, like in the US, for example, we use Free Roam, freecampsites.net. Those are some good resources to find free camping near you. You can also stay in national forests for up to 14 days, BLM land. those are all free places to camp. And that is how we saved a ton of money when we were road tripping around the US. So that in particular is for there, but I'm pretty sure like in places like Norway and places where you have the right to roam and like sleep wherever, it's a great way to save a ton of money. Doing van life, honestly, too. I feel like that
Saved
goes
us
in
a
the
ton.
yeah, it goes in the same boat where we've done rental vans in New Zealand, in Switzerland, in Iceland, and Washington, and it always saves a ton because you're basically combining the price of a rental car and a accommodation. So you're not spending both separately, it's just tied into one.
Yeah. I think that's definitely saved us a ton of money. That's how we like our whole first 2 years, I feel like, of dating, road tripping and everything. That's why we made it look like we were traveling the world. In reality, we were traveling in California and sleeping in the back of our car and camping on free land. But like
it wasn't
you said,
the most comfortable, but we made it work. It's a mindset.
I will say that camping, like you said, these days, if you go to Yosemite, you pay for like 5 nights camping in Yosemite.
$40 a night.
Yeah, it gets crazy. I mean,
Camp inflation is real these days.
Oh man,
It used to be like $15 or something.
I know. All right. Anyway, taking us on to the next one. So after camping, we have booking midweek flights. Honestly, I feel like this can, once again, depending on when you book it, we think that it can save you a ton of money traveling midweek.
Or on like Sunday nights, honestly, too.
Yeah, like especially, and the airport is just less busy. You go there, it's much easier to get through security. Parking's less expensive. A lot of the places that we leave our car near LAX, it's a lot more expensive to park there on the weekend compared to parking there midweek.
Makes sense. Once again, if you're working a 9 to 5, you're typically traveling on the weekends. But like he said, if you have the flexibility, if you work a remote job, then doing weekday travel is definitely a move. Also, like just it's a much better experience. We now try and only travel during the week, and we'll try and be home on the weekends. We kind of do it in reverse because that way it's way less busy everywhere, and it's just a much more enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's made it much easier. But I mean, I feel like, I don't know, is that a thing you can talk to your boss about? Being like, hey, can I work Friday, Saturday, Sunday this week and take off Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Like it depends how chill your boss is. Anyway,
all right, taking us in. We have 2 left. This one, we were chatting about it. We were going to take it out of here, but I honestly think this is a great tip, is skipping alcohol on your trips.
It adds up a lot.
Yeah.
And it really depends where you're going to. If you are traveling around the States, alcohol can get really expensive. It's like in California, especially, it's like $15 for a cocktail.
It's like $20 for some cocktails.
15 minimum,
dude,
up to 22 or something like.
And it's crazy to me. It's like they give you a quarter of a drink. It's not. It doesn't even feel like a cocktail. It's like, yo, this is 4 sips and a
ton of ice. Yeah,
it's just crazy.
And so you could save a ton of money by just getting water or like a soda instead.
Yeah.
Versus that, unless you're in like somewhere like Italy where Prosecco is literally as cheap as water.
Yeah.
It's like €3 for Prosecco over in Italy. I'm like, what a dream.
I know. I feel like traveling in Europe is just not a lot cheaper, but it definitely feels a lot cheaper than if you were to travel here in the US. Like traveling in California, stupid expensive.
Versus, yeah, I feel like especially when we were in Italy, I felt like the cost of living was lower, the grocery prices were lower, the gas prices were lower, all that kind of stuff. But then again, we come from California, which is just stupid expensive. So
yeah, and I feel like this is a thing that's becoming more and more prevalent. A lot of our friends, when we go out to eat, they're like, oh, I don't drink anymore. Or even people that we meet. I mean, I love a good brewski. We love going wine tasting and stuff. So for us, it's part of the experience.
It's more of like a social
especially
thing.
If you guys were trying to save money, this is a huge one. I mean, you could go out in the town and spend $100, $200 in a night if you, let's say you go out
on just drinks, not even food.
And it adds up very, very quickly, especially when you are traveling. So great way to save money, which takes us to the last one. G kind of alluded this one earlier, but using all the different cashback sites.
Yep. I mentioned Rakuten. And then also just like the cashback cards, if you're not going to get into the points and miles game, like I have a little Citibank Costco card. So anytime I shop at Costco, I get my cash back and stuff like that. Just really choosing one that's going to optimize for your lifestyle, because like Steven and I don't really go to Costco anymore because there's only 2 of us and that's a lot of food, or like a lot of items for the 2 of us. So I really only go like twice a year, but we used to go more often because we used to live with a lot more people. And so like, don't choose that if you're a solo person. Get a different card to get cash back on, because you're going to optimize it better, you know?
All right. Well, that was our 20 tips on how to stay and travel.
20-ish tips.
20-ish on how to stay and travel more budget friendly. We just want you to remember traveling can be as expensive as you want it to be, but it can also be very, very cheap depending on where you're going, how you like to travel, things you like to do when you travel. For instance, if you like to travel and stay at 5-star luxury resorts and eat at the most expensive places.
Then this episode probably wasn't for you.
Like that's great, but for a lot of people, we love to save money on travel. It makes it so much easier. It makes it so you can travel more. Why would I go and spend $5,000 or $10,000 on one trip when I could go on 15 trips and spend under $1,000 per trip? You know,
unless it's like your honeymoon. You know?
Yeah, I mean, we already did our episode on French Polynesia. If you missed it, go check that episode out. It was one of the most beautiful places we've ever been.
Totally worth the money.
But we also sold our soul for it. So.
Yes, we did. It was very expensive.
If you guys are still listening, don't forget to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you guys are here on YouTube, woohoo, make sure to give us a like and subscribe. And make sure to go say hi on our Unfiltered Adventures podcast Instagram page. We just hit 500 followers on there.
Did we? Oh man, that's funny.
Let's go. So make sure you guys come say hi on there. We have been DMing quite a few of you guys, as well as asking for new podcast recommendations. If you guys have any creators or any other travelers that you think that you would love to have us on the podcast, we want to reach out to them, get them on here so we can chat. We love talking with other travelers. We love talking with other creators, and that's exactly what we're talking about here on Unfiltered Adventures. So with that, we will be wrapping this week up, and we will see you next Friday with another episode.
Bye.